Good afternoon and welcome all to Spring Framework Part 3. And this is going to be the prerequisite for starting with the Spring Boot. Alright, and we are going to finish it up in maybe 3 or 4 classes before we get going with Spring Boot. So let me give you a recap of what we have achieved so far. We achieved those points. We saw getter and setter injection. We saw constructor injection, parameterized constructor injection with parameters and without parameters, right? So let me quickly get going and start the project. All right, and now take a look at what we have achieved so far. This is the property injection, right? Wherein X and Y are two properties, right? We have a point class, it has two properties, X and Y, and we have a we can say, just a moment, we have a triangle class, right, with getters and setters of those properties. Now we had to inject on the object, on the basis of object, and what we did, we created, right, 0 point, 1 point and 0.2 and applied X and Y properties from here, which we can apply dynamically as well, right? And then we did property injection, or we can say object injection, from this side, right? And now today we have a different concept of annotations, right? If you want to introduce annotation based injections or annotation based calls, right? For that we are going to achieve, everything using annotations, and we are not going to use XML files, right? And for that, let me show you a quick demonstration. So I will go to Java class. And let me say because we have to be sure of annotations, right? So for that we will create an interface, and let me call this, I'll show you the true dependency. What is a true dependency injection today? For example, I will go to other and create interface. So we call this INTERFAC, so Java interface, and let's say we have a car and we have a bike, right? So a car is a vehicle and a bike is a vehicle, right? So now this interface is going to have a method which both car and bike are going to implement from, right? So let's call this as the vehicle has let's say about wide drive, right? Because what we do, we drive a vehicle, all right, or maybe ride or anything like, but yeah, both the things, both car and bike are going to override, or we can say implement this drive function from vehicle, right? So that we don't have wide drive function declared twice. So we're going to declare it only once in the interface and implement the same drive function in the derived classes. And derived classes are going to be, for example, we have a car and a bike. So this is the class bike. Let me get rid of comments here, and I will say implements vehicle. Right, the moment we say implement vehicle, we have to implement all the methods, right? Because every method inside an interface is abstract. Abstract means you're forced to implement that method, right? So because you're not going to call the bike, or we are not going to call bike class without calling the drive class. That means if I call bike, I have to use drive. That's why we are overriding this drive method from the interface vehicle, right? Just for usability of the code. And we are not going to do much here. Let me create this as string, right? So rather than creating this as void, I will create this as string. So that means this has to be public string. So now I'll have to return something right here, right? And I'll go and I will say return, let's say about you want to drive, right? So riding a bike. So the implementation can be different, but the method is same. So I'll say riding a bike, right? So that is done. Let me go for another class right here, and let's call this as car. Right now we have a class car and we have a class, right, bike, and both are going to implement, right, the vehicle interface, right? Implements, right? So I'll say vehicle interface, and now we have to implement all the abstract methods. So that's understood. Alright, so we know this is basically once you have an interface, so you are meant to basically implement, because all the methods inside an interface are abstract methods. But yeah, still the type of the function is string, so we have to return something because the return type is string. So I'll say driving a car. Now you can see implementation is different. Here we are driving a car, and inside bike we are riding a bike. So the implementation is quite different, but yeah, declaration is taken place only once. We're declaring the drive function once in vehicle, which is an interface vehicle, so that we don't have to declare it twice. Other than that, if you are not using interface, then you had to declare it here and you had to declare it here. So that means declaration would take place 2 times. So we are just solving that problem, right? And now what we are going to do here, I will simply show you the annotation based, and then I'll show you non-annotation based, which is, sorry, I'll show you the XML based and then I'll show you the annotation based. So I'll say bean ID is equal to, let's say, car, right? And I will say class is equal to, right, a something, right? As you know that we have to give reference of the class right here. Alright, so you're already aware of that. You've seen that in the first class or in the second class, right? In case if you're jumped in directly to this class, what I recommend, I reckon going back and checking part 1 and part 2 before we get started with part number 3 of Spring, right? And now I'll say class is going to be beans. Let's say about beans.car, right? So I'll say beans.car. So it's as simple as anything. We've seen that, but yeah, before I get started with annotation based, I just want to recap it again. So I'll say now this is of type car. The car is small car, I suppose. Yeah. Alright, so you can say beans.car will be typecasted to bean.car, and I'll say hey application context. Well, then this application context is nothing but it is the spring.xml file that we are asking this file to, right? So this is right here, and I'll say please give me a bean, right, with an ID car. Alright, and now if I go to car C and I say out.println C dot, you can say we have this single function drive, right? So now if I call this drive function and that I run this, I'm getting driving a car. So far this understood, we already seen that, alright, so we don't need to recheck it. Now for example, I don't want to use this XML. Why would I go to XML, right, and write configuration and link every single class of mine, right, and give it an ID here? So it's going to be too hectic. That's why after Java 5 we had annotations, right? And now annotations are replacing XML. Why are the annotations replacing XML? Because XML is nothing but meta information. What is meta? Meta is information about information, right? For example, you want some information to be available at runtime. We know that if I comment, this is the information that's available at runtime, because you're not compiling. XML is being interpreted rather than your Java. Java gets compiled. Every Java will get compiled, and you'll create a class file of Java, and then that class file will run, right? So what happens during compilation, right? If you comment something like this, if I say hello, right, this is a bike class. So during compilation, right, this comment is going to be removed. If you know the compiler design, in the first phase itself it's going to be removed, right? So lexical analysis phase is the first phase, so it's going to remove these comments. So that means comments will not be available at runtime. So we want some information, right, and I want a platform wherein I can save my information at runtime and ask the information, right, whenever required. So for that we have XML files now, and then after XML we having a new revolution that's taking place in the industry, right, in the programming industry. Microsoft had it, Java is having it, and now PHP and other languages also going for annotation based system. So annotations are not removed by lexical analysis phase. So for example, this is an override annotation, so this will not be removed, right? So it's going to be available at runtime also. So the lexical analysis phase of compiler will never remove this annotation, right? But yeah, had it been comments, it is going to remove that. Now, but now, why do you require XML knowledge, or why do you need knowledge of XML? Because it's a separate thing that we have to learn. Being a programmer, why should I learn XML then, right? If I'm a programmer, if I'm a Java programmer, so that adds too much of burden on me as a developer. So what I do, so I say, yeah, I need some replacement. So I instead of going for these what we call that XML files, I'll go with annotations. For example, now then, if I delete this now, for example, there's no tag here. I go to bike, right, and I go to car, and I run the program. It is surely going to give an exception, right? It says service unavailable. So let me, okay, 404 not found, because it is throwing in exception. Now you can see the exception. It has thrown an exception. No being named car is defined, right? So because I need car referenced in the Spring container, which is this Spring.xml, since you have removed this, right, so it is not available now. So then the problem starts. How are you going to cope up with that, right? So we are going to cope up with that by using annotations. And now to start using annotations, we might have to add some extra libraries, and those extra libraries are, for example, we are using the schema instances, right? We are using schema beans, and we are using schema instance, and right, you have to write to the XML context now. Right, so for that you can even Google annotation based configuration, right? So you can say annotation in Spring XML config. So you can Google that, what is the XML config if I have to use Spring annotation based configuration. So you can even get that from anywhere. You can Google it, and there's going to be available. Even if you don't want to Google it, right, I'm still going to show you what lines of code do I have to, or do we have to add. But yeah, you can simply Google it, so you don't need to have this information. As you can see that this is ready, so I'll copy this, right, and I will paste it right here. Now you can see that context is what is more required, and you can say context annotation config is also there, right? Or if you want to do it yourself, it's as simple as anything. If you want to Google it, don't worry, you don't require to have this knowledge, right? Because you want to use annotations and then configure your XML file to use those annotations, so that's not a problem, right? Well, I'll do right here, so I will say XMLNS, whatever is written here, and I'll say semicolon. Now I want to go with context, right? So context, right, and I will say is equivalent to, and now I'll go with, for example, I copy this right here. I'll say, I'll copy the first line of XML, which is a Spring Speak schema, and I will say Spring Framework, www.springframework.org/schema, right, and then I'll say context. Now since I have integrated this context, right, and there are many more things that we want to go ahead with, right, and configure them, all right, so you need not close down this right here. So I will not close it down, right? It's because schema location, because you have basically referenced the schema, right, with context right here, but now the location may differ. Now let's see what we have. We have this here. Let me just give it a bit of space. We have springframework.org, which is Spring Beans 4.0.xsd. So this remains there. I don't have to do anything with that, but what I will do right here, right, in the schema location, I'll just hit enter and keep it within quotes, right? So I have to keep it within quotes, and there has to be a space, like we're having space here. You can see schema location has two URLs, one URL is here, right, and the second URL is here, but there is a space between both the URLs. Do you see that? Yeah, if you can see that there is some difference, what I will do, and I will create another space right here, right after the beans tag, and I will say schema beans. I'll just type another URL here, which is www.springframework.org/schema/beans, right? And do you want to use beans? Yeah, Spring Beans 4.0.xsd, right? So because we have Spring content here, you can see that we have Spring Beans 4.0.xsd. It's already used, and Spring Beans is used. So two are used. Third one, the reference that I will be using is also very, very important. So I will say I am going to add 2 more lines, which is Spring schema context. So I'll say schema dash context. So schema context is there. All right, so let me see all after hitting the enter key. Schema context is there. Hit enter again. All right, now we have schema context, we have schema beans, right, and we have schema context, and we have Spring Beans 4.0.xsd, and now we need another library here. I'll just go ahead, hit space, enter, and I will say that schema slash beans, right, and now this is where I want my another library, right? So I'll say spring framework.org schema, and then I'll go to beans, and then I'll say spring dash beans 4.0.xsd. that is already here. Yeah, now we have to include schema context, right? So I'll say schema slash context. So this is what I have to repeat. You can copy what I write. It's not necessary to have the knowledge of this. So, and then I will use spring context dash 4.0 dash xsd. So this is what you can again use, right? So I hope you got it right. Okay, let me keep it properly documented so that you don't face any problem here. All right, now then everything is included, or what you can do, you can simply go to Google, copy and paste it here. So still it's going to work, so that's not a problem, right? All right, now my job is to use or we can say to tell that I will be using a context here, which is going to be, so I'll call this context. So I'll say there is context, context. So you can see now I have to target this context, and I will say context, right, and then I'll say component component dash scan, right? So whenever you scan for components, which package do you scan? For example, if I'm using annotations, I require a proper beans package wherein I'm going to scan those things. So I will say for that you have a base package. I'll make you understand this, don't worry. I'll just try and make you understand. Right, so I'll say base dash package is equal to BEAN. So this is the package beans right here, right? So now I will not be using or I will not be using beans tags, right, anymore. So since I'm not using beans tag, I have to give the reference of the directory which is going to hold all my beans, so that once I use this component, how do I use this component scan? But I'll go, because I have to use annotations now, right, as I told you. Sorry, I'll go to car and I'll say component, right, compo. So it is an component, it's a bean component. All right, so you are going to use this annotation, and it belongs to stereotype component package, right? Now the moment I mark this as component, right, I need the reference of, because I may not have one component, I have this bean directory, and it may have as many components as I can or I want. But yeah, for example, I don't have this beans package, I have controller package, right? Maybe the package name is something different. How does this file spring.xml know wherein the components reside, or what is the base directory of my components, which is this beans directory, right? For example, if I mark this as component, for example, I marked my car class as component, right? You can see, and now if I run it, so let it get compiled, and now if I go and run it, you can still see I'm getting an exception error, that there is no bean named car which is defined. So first you tell your spring.xml file that, hey, I am not going to use Spring XML file configuration. I'm not going to use bean tags. Instead, I'm going to use much latest component tags. Sorry. Now then, you have specified the package, and now if I go and run it again, all right, so you can see that you have spring.xml invalid nested exception, and matching wildcards component scan. So let me basically see. My context is here, right, and I have com context and colon component dash scan. So I'll say whenever you use component scan, so that is component dash scan. Whenever you use component scan, use base dash package. Okay, it was a mistake. Use the base package beans for component based scanning, right? And then try and close it down. Alright, so let me try it out once again. Deploying, so deploying is done. Right, we still have an error right here. Because we have to call for car, I suppose, right? So let me go ahead and see my index.jsp. Alright, so out.println c.drive. So C is a car, right? And it should match. So you can clearly see that I'm asking for public class car right here. So it should match the class name directly now, because I'm not handling it the way I was handling it previously. Alright, so I will say C context.getBean car, and which is quite understood, right? And then what I say you need to give me the drive function of the car, right? So this is also done. So I'll say please give me the drive function. So I'll say let me close it down. So let me only create instance using the annotations tag. Line number 10, CVX complex matching wildcard. So we have something different. So let me see the error first. But no declaration can be found for element. Okay, now we haven't. Basically, there is something wrong with the annotations right here. Maybe I have written something wrong. So let me take it out all, because it is component based. So let me go back and save this. Alright, so context annotation config. So I'll be using this tag because it has everything nicely poised. So maybe I made some spelling mistake or something. Maybe you can do the same. You can copy it or you can write it, whatever you want. Right, so now you can say now it has done, right? So now I'll go ahead and I will say context, right? And I will say context dash, and now we have to call okay, yes, while website certificate. Okay, fine. So I'll say context dash component. So I'll say component dash scan. So it's retrieving XML. You can still see that it's still processing. I'll say context dash component scan, and I'll go ahead and say base dash package is equivalent to something, and the base package is, it is not a self-closing tag, and right, so I'll close the component scan. So the base package is beans beans. All right. Yeah, now you can clearly see it is working fine. So we had some error while writing this, so it happens. You can download it directly. I'll keep the link available down in the description section. You can download it directly from there as well, right? So you can have to copy and paste even if you don't have this line, so it doesn't matter. Right, so now I'll go to my index.jsp, and what I can do, I'll say out.println c.drive. Now we have no reference of bean. Alright, you'll see day by day things will get easy. Now, other than other programming languages, it used to get tougher, but here things are going to get easy because you are not going to use something that you were using. Driving a car, absolutely perfect. Now you can see that we are driving a car without even referencing that car here, right? What are we doing? We're just using component scan. Do your component scan in the beans directory, and yeah, we know that still it has to match as that of the name of the car, or the name of the class, or let's say about name of the class and name of the bean, or I mean the bean that we are targeting in let's say about index.jsp, or whenever we are asking application context. So the moment you are asking application context about anything, right? For example, you are asking application context about car, so it has to match the name as that of the car. So you can see if it's capital, so it has to be capital here. For example, if I go on and use context.getBean and I'll say capital C, will this work? So I'll have to C, right? You can clearly see, no, it's not working because it is capital and here it is small. So if I say small car, I'm immediately driving a car. For example, now if I ask for bike, right? So let me say bike. All right, so now I imported bike also. All right, and I'll configure it to bike. So let me convert it to bike. Yeah, so now I'll say instead of C, I'll say B. Instead of C, I'll say B. So now I can say b.drive, as simple as anything. Now if I go ahead and refresh it, all right, so let it get compiled first. So deploying. All right, so now we can see notes that no bean named bike. There is no bean which has a name bike. So that is understood. Why? Because if you see this car right here, it has a component annotation, right? But in our case, when I go back to bike, it does not have component annotation. Either I go on and define it, right? For example, how do I define it? I have to go ahead and say bean tag id is equal to, let's say, about bike, and I can just carry on, right? And I will say class is equal to beans dot what is that, bike, right? So that's what we can do to achieve this, right? But we don't intend doing that, right? As I have said earlier. So let it deploy. We don't intend doing this, right? So because it's a component riding a bike, so we're getting this answer. But the moment I take this line away, that means it has no reference, right? Because we are doing component scan on the beans package right here. So for that, what I will do, now you can see it will create an error. Exactly, it has created an error. No name, no bean named bike is defined. So I'll go to bike and I'll mark this even as @component. So now after marking this as component, here you go, everything is set and done, right? So this is how you call, because you don't even have to define them, right? Yeah, even if let's say about if you have to apply a property injection, or if you have to apply any injection, you can easily do that, right? Fine. So what we have learned so far, let me take a look at it. I don't want to give you too much to do. Yeah, we still have a good amount of time left. Now, for example, now if I want to apply constructor injection, for example, it does not have any property. Bike does not have any property. It has only one method, which is a drive, right? So for example, I will say, or we can say private, right, string, right, brand. Now we have this private string brand here. Let me create getters and setters for this. I'll say getters and setters. Quickly create getters and setters because I have this brand right here. And let me create inside car as well. So I'll say public string brand. Right now, if I go and insert code, getters and setters, now everything is set and done, right? So now we know that now we have properties in here. Now, for example, if I say return driving a some brand, let's say about driving a, I'll concatenate it and I'll say plus plus, which brand are you driving? I will say get brand of this class, right? And I'll go to bike also. I will say riding a plus plus, and I'll try and close it down here. Close it out here. I will say get brand, right? So we're getting brand here as well. So now we know that we have some properties in here, right? If you want to set those properties statically or dynamically, you can do both. For example, if I go here and I will say beans, right? You can say bean, right? So I'll say bean class bean name is equal to, what was the name? Bean name is equal to car, and it has class is equal to beans dot car, and now we are targeting property, and for that we know that we have this property tag, right? So property name is brand, and I will give it a value, and I'll say value, right? So I'll give it a value. Value is equivalent to, right? So I will say BMW, right? And now if I go and run the same here in index.jsp, we are running bike this time. So let me have car back. All right, so now instead of bike, so we'll go back to car, and now we should get the brand name as well. Right, so what are we getting? Beans.bike cannot cross to beans.car. Why? Okay, we are calling bike, we have to call car. Alright, so driving a BMW car, you can clearly see that the dependency has been reduced. Alright, we have applied injection from here, which is called as property injection, and it has a very good funda. The moment you say property name is equal to brand, and then you say value, that means what are you calling here inside the class car? You're calling actually the setter, which is this set brand. And here once you are retrieving, you're calling get brand. For example, if I delete this set brand, what will happen? Right? In case if I delete it, now you can clearly see, let it deploy. So in case if I delete it, you will surely get an exception, right? So that means once I call property, it uses the setter. Once I retrieve it, right, like this here, right, so it uses the getter property. We also used getter directly. And now for example, if I now go to Spring.xml and I say value, I want to delete this car class. Now what is going to happen? Right, you're getting an exception right here. You can do it statically as well. For example, if I don't have this, right, because I have now object, right, I've asked for the instance right here, I can say directly c dot set brand, and which is going to be let's say about Honda. Alright, you can do it directly here, Honda as well. You can call Honda directly here. So driving a Honda car. That same can be applied to bikes as well, right? So I'm showing you very little things, but yeah, we are moving forward. I hope you all are watching and learning good things. Do practice, and you need to be in synchronize, right? So you need to be in sync with me. Synchronous policy has to be applied. Whatever I teach you today has to be completed today only before we move, because things may get easy. Things will get easy, but they may get lengthy, right? So maybe if you are doing practice of 1 hour, so tomorrow you may have to do it for 4 hours. So things may get lengthier, but I'm moving nicely and I'm moving very slowly considering the pace of you guys as well. So you need to sync with me and keep your pace and do practice this, right? It's a very little thing, right? Do practice component based, annotation based referencing, and I'll meet you tomorrow at the same time. Bye bye, take care.